In the dusty plains of the American frontier, where the sun beat down like an unrelenting hammer and the wind whispered secrets of hardship and hope, a lone cowboy named Jack Harlan rode his weary horse along the trail toward the town of Silver Creek. Jack was a man shaped by the Wild West, his face etched with lines from years of riding through storms and staring down danger. He had a past that haunted him, a wrongful accusation of cattle rustling back in Texas that had forced him to flee, leaving behind a life he once knew. Folks said he was quick with a gun, but slower with trust, and on this scorching afternoon in 1875, he spotted something that stopped him cold. There, in the middle of the barren path, was a woman, heavy with child, her dress torn and soaked in sweat, struggling to pull a broken-down wagon all by herself. The wagon's wheel had splintered, and the oxen lay dead from exhaustion, their bodies baking under the relentless sky. She was pulling with all her might, her hands blistered and raw, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Jack's heart twisted at the sight. This wasn't just hardship. This was desperation personified. He reined in his horse, the animal snorting softly as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The woman didn't notice him at first, her focus locked on the impossible task before her. She was a widow, he could tell from the black mourning band on her arm, and the way she moved spoke of a grief too fresh to bear. Her name was Eliza Thorne, though Jack didn't know that yet. Eliza had lost her husband, Samuel, just weeks ago in a senseless act of violence born from the ugly underbelly of frontier discrimination. Samuel was a freedman, a black man who had fought for the Union in the Civil War and come west with dreams of building a homestead for his family. But in Silver Creek, where old prejudices lingered like smoke after a fire, a group of wealthy ranchers accused him of stealing land that was rightfully his, land he'd bought fair and square with his savings. They didn't like seeing a man like him prosper, so they ambushed him one night, stringing him up without trial, leaving Eliza alone, pregnant and penniless. The town sheriff turned a blind eye, calling it frontier justice, but it was nothing more than murder wrapped in lies. Now Eliza was trying to reach her sister's farm 50 miles away, pulling that wagon because she had no choice. Her baby's life depended on it. Jack swung down from his saddle, his boots kicking up dust as he approached. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice rough but kind, like gravel smoothed by a river. She startled, whipping around with a makeshift stick in her hand, ready to defend herself. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a fire in them, a dignity that refused to be broken. "Stay back," she warned, her voice trembling but strong. "I don't need help from strangers." Jack held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. He saw the swell of her belly, the way she favored one foot from a twisted ankle, and the empty canteen dangling from the wagon. "Looks like you do," he said gently. "That wagon ain't going nowhere without a new wheel, and you can't pull it alone. Not in your condition." Eliza hesitated, her pride warring with her exhaustion. She'd faced enough cruelty in recent days. Folks in town spitting at her feet, calling her names because of her mixed marriage, refusing to sell her supplies. But something in Jack's eyes felt different, like he carried his own scars. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plain, Jack didn't wait for permission. He unhitched his horse and tied it to the wagon, then set to work mending the wheel with tools from his saddlebag. Eliza watched him warily, sinking down onto a rock to catch her breath. "Why re you helpin' me?" she asked finally, her voice softer now. Jack glanced up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Seen enough sufferin' in this world. Don't need to add to it." He didn't tell her about his own wrongful past yet, the false claim that had branded him an outlaw, forcing him to roam from town to town, always looking over his shoulder. But as they talked, bits of their stories unfolded. Eliza shared how Samuel had been a good man, hardworking and loving, how they dreamed of raising their child free from the chains of the past. The ranchers who killed him, led by a ruthless man named Harlan Baxter, no relation to Jack, but the name stung like salt in a wound, had stolen their deed and burned their cabin, claiming the land for their cattle empire. It was discrimination pure and simple, the kind that festered in the West where law was as thin as the air. Night fell like a blanket, and Jack built a small fire, sharing his meager rations of jerky and beans. Eliza ate gratefully, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The baby kicked, and for a moment, a smile broke through her sorrow. "He's a fighter like his pa," she said. Jack nodded, feeling a pull toward this woman he barely knew. Danger lurked nearby. He knew Baxter's men patrolled these trails, looking for stragglers to intimidate. Sure enough, as the stars twinkled overhead, the sound of hoofbeats echoed in the distance. 3 riders appeared, their silhouettes dark against the moonlit horizon. They were Baxter's enforcers, guns slung low, faces twisted in smirks. "Well, looky here," the leader sneered, eyeing Eliza with disgust. "The widow Thorne, still crawlin' like a bug. And who's this? Her new protector." Jack stood slowly, his hand inching toward his holster. "She's under my watch now. Best you ride on." The tension crackled like dry lightning. Eliza's heart pounded. She knew these men. They'd been there the night Samuel died, laughing as they dragged him away. One of them dismounted, spitting tobacco juice near her feet. "Ain't no place for her kind out here. And you, stranger, you look familiar. Ain't you that rustler from Texas?" Jack's jaw tightened. His wrongful past had caught up again, spread by wanted posters that lied about his crimes. But he wouldn't back down. "That was a lie, same as what you did to her husband. Now get, before things turn ugly." The men laughed, drawing their guns. Eliza grabbed her stick, ready to fight, but Jack stepped in front. A shot rang out, grazing his arm, but he fired back, dropping one rider and scattering the others. They fled into the night, cursing and promising revenge. Blood seeped from Jack's wound, but he waved off Eliza's concern. "Just a scratch," he said, though pain etched his face. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Jack finished repairing the wagon. But Eliza was too weak to go on alone, and with Baxter's men likely to return with more, he made a decision. "You're comin' with me," he said firmly, helping her onto his horse while hitching the wagon behind. "I got a hideout up in the hills, safe from those vultures. We'll get you to your sisters, but not like this." Eliza protested at first. Her pride was all she had left, but the warmth in his voice, the way he looked at her with respect, not pity, softened her resolve. They rode off together, the wagon creaking behind, leaving the sight of her struggle in the dust. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a journey toward justice, where Jack's skills and Eliza's courage would clash with the forces of discrimination that plagued the West. The hills rose like ancient guardians as Jack and Eliza made their way higher, the trail narrowing into rocky paths lined with scrub brush and wildflowers. Jack's arm throbbed from the gunshot, but he pushed on, his mind racing with plans. He knew Baxter's ranch was nearby, a sprawling empire built on stolen land and broken lives. Baxter himself was a man of influence, white-haired and sharp-eyed, who preached about civilizing the West while crushing anyone who didn't fit his vision, especially folks like Samuel, who dared to claim equality. Jack had heard tales of Baxter's wrongs during his travels, how he'd driven out native families and cheated Mexican settlers, all under the guise of progress. Now, with Eliza by his side, Jack felt a fire igniting in his chest, a chance to right not just her wrong, but perhaps his own. Eliza rode in silence at first, her hands clutching the saddle horn, the baby stirring restlessly. "You didn't have to do that back there," she said finally, her voice carrying over the clip-clop of hooves. "Fight for me." Most men would have ridden on. Jack glanced back, his hat shading eyes that held a mix of sorrow and determination. "Most men ain't seen what I have. My pa was a sheriff, honest as they come, till he crossed a powerful family. They framed him for talking bribes, hung him high. I was just a boy, but I learned then that justice don't come easy in this land. Been runnin' from my own frame-up ever since." Eliza's heart ached at his words. She saw the parallel to Samuel's fate. "Samuel believed in the law," she replied. "He served in the war, thought it'd earn him respect. But in Silver Creek, color matters more than character." Their shared pain wove a bond between them, fragile yet strong, like a rope twisted from threads of loss. As they crested a ridge, Jack's hideout came into view. A small cabin tucked against a cliff, hidden by pines. It was simple, with a corral for his horse and a spring for water. He helped Eliza down, her feet touching ground with relief. Inside, the air smelled of wood and leather. Jack lit a lantern, revealing a bed, a table, and shelves of canned goods. "Rest here," he said. "I'll tend to your ankle and get some food cooking." Eliza sank onto the bed, exhaustion claiming her, but gratitude shone in her eyes. Over a meal of stew and biscuits, they talked more. About dreams deferred, the beauty of the West despite its brutality, and the love that had sustained her marriage. Jack found himself opening up, sharing how he'd cleared his name in small ways, helping folks along the trail, but never staying long enough to build a life. Eliza's story stirred something deep in him, a resolve to confront Baxter, not just for her, but to prove that dignity could prevail. But danger wasn't far behind. That night, as rain pattered on the roof, scouts from Baxter's ranch spotted smoke from the chimney. By morning, a posse of 5 men surrounded the cabin, guns drawn. "Come out, rustler," Baxter himself bellowed, his voice booming like thunder. He'd heard of the skirmish on the trail and recognized Jack from posters. Eliza froze, but Jack whispered, "Stay low. I'll handle this." He stepped out, hands raised, but his eyes locked on Baxter. "You got the wrong man, same as you did with Samuel Thorne. That land was his, and you know it." Baxter laughed, a cold sound. "Thorne was a thief just like you, and his widow, she's got no claim. Hand her over or we'll burn this place down." The threat hung heavy, but Eliza emerged then, her chin high, belly proud. "I ain't going nowhere with murderers," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear. Gunfire erupted, bullets whizzing past as Jack dove for cover, returning fire with precision. One man fell, another retreated. Eliza, from the doorway, grabbed Jack's rifle and fired a warning shot, her aim true from years on the farm. The posse faltered, surprised by her courage. Baxter cursed, mounting his horse. "This ain't over," he yelled, riding off with his remaining men. Jack, breathing hard, turned to Eliza. "You saved us," he said, awe in his voice. She smiled faintly. "We saved each other." In that moment, amid the smoke and adrenaline, a spark of love kindled. Not just rescue, but partnership, born from shared trials. They couldn't stay. Baxter would return with more. Jack packed supplies and they set out at dusk, heading toward the territorial judge in the next county, a man known for fairness. The journey was perilous, crossing rivers swollen from rain, evading patrols, all while Eliza's labor pains loomed closer. Along the way, they encountered allies, a group of homesteaders who'd suffered under Baxter's thumb, including a native scout named Running Wolf, who joined them after hearing Eliza's tale. "My people know discrimination," he said. "We'll fight for justice together." The group grew, a small band united by dignity and resolve. Finally, they reached the judge's outpost, a sturdy building in a bustling town. Baxter was there, too, having ridden ahead to spin his lies. The hearing was tense, folks crowding the room. Eliza testified first, her voice ringing with truth, recounting Samuel's murder and the stolen deed. Jack followed, revealing his own wrongful past, producing letters from Texas that cleared his name, evidence he'd carried for years. Witnesses from the homesteaders corroborated, exposing Baxter's pattern of terror. The judge, a stern but just man, ruled in favor of Eliza, restoring her land and ordering Baxter's arrest for murder. As handcuffs clicked on Baxter's wrists, he glared at Jack and Eliza. "You think this ends it?" But it did for him. Outside, under a clear sky, Eliza turned to Jack. "You gave me more than rescue. You gave me hope." He took her hand. "And you gave me a reason to stop running." With the baby due any day, they rode back to rebuild, their love a beacon in the Wild West, where justice, though hard won, could triumph over darkness. The trail back to Silver Creek felt different now, lighter somehow, even with the weight of what lay ahead. Jack and Eliza rode side by side, Running Wolf scouting ahead, the homesteaders following in wagons laden with tools and seeds. The judge's ruling had spread like wildfire, and Baxter's empire was crumbling. His men deserting, his lands redistributed to those he'd wronged. But victory didn't erase the scars. Eliza's hand often rested on her belly, feeling the kicks that reminded her of Samuel's legacy. "This child will know a better world," she whispered one evening by the campfire. Jack nodded, poking the flames. "Because of you, your courage lit the way." Their conversations deepened, weaving memories of lost loves with tentative dreams of the future. Jack spoke of building a ranch honest and true, where no one would be judged by skin or past. Eliza shared stories of her childhood in the South, escaping chains only to find new ones in the West. Their bond grew, a quiet love born not from fairy tales, but from shared battles against injustice. Danger still shadowed them. Baxter, out on bail through corrupt ties, sent assassins, 2 gunslingers who ambushed their camp at midnight. Shots shattered the silence, and chaos ensued. Jack rolled behind a rock, firing back, while Eliza, sheltered by the wagon, loaded rifles for the others. Running Wolf's arrows flew silent and deadly, felling one attacker. The homesteaders fought fiercely, their own grievances fueling their aim. In the end, the assassins lay defeated, but not without cost. A homesteader wounded, his arm in a sling. As dawn broke, Jack confronted the survivors. "Tell Baxter it's over. Justice is comin' for him." The men nodded, terrified, and fled. Eliza bandaged the injured, her hands steady, but tears fell for the violence that seemed endless. "When will it stop?" she asked Jack. He pulled her close. "When we make it stop. Together." They pressed on, arriving in Silver Creek to a town transformed. Word of the judge's order had arrived, and folks who'd once turned away now offered help, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps genuine change. The sheriff, shamed, resigned, and a new one was elected from the homesteaders. Eliza's land was restored, the charred cabin site waiting for rebirth. Jack helped her rebuild, hammering nails and raising walls, his wrongful past fading as the community embraced him as a hero. But Baxter wouldn't go quietly. He rallied his last loyalists for a final stand, barricading his ranch house. The climax came under a stormy sky, thunder rumbling like distant cannons. Jack, Eliza, and their allies approached, demanding surrender. Baxter emerged, gun in hand, face twisted in rage. "You think a pregnant widow and a wanted man can take me down?" he sneered. Eliza stepped forward, unafraid. "It's not just us. It's everyone you've hurt." Gunfire erupted again, a fierce exchange that tested every ounce of courage. Jack took a bullet to the shoulder, but pressed on, disarming Baxter with a well-aimed shot. As lightning flashed, Baxter fell to his knees, defeated. The authorities arrived soon after, hauling him away for trial. Justice, dramatic and hard-fought, had prevailed. In the aftermath, as rain washed the land clean, Eliza's labor began. Jack stayed by her side in the new cabin, holding her hand through the pain. The baby boy arrived crying into the world, healthy and strong. They named him Samuel Jack, honoring the past while looking to the future. The community gathered, sharing stories of resilience, turning the Wild West into a place of dignity for all. Jack and Eliza married under the open sky, their love a testament to rescue from danger, redemption from wrongful pasts, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. In the years that followed, their ranch thrived, a beacon for the discriminated and downtrodden, proving that even in the harshest lands, pride and courage could forge a better tomorrow. The morning after the judge's ruling, the sky over Silver Creek looked washed clean, the kind of wide, honest blue that makes a person believe the world might finally be fair. Jack stood on the porch of the half-burned cabin that was now legally Eliza's again, coffee in one hand, the other pressed against the bandage on his shoulder. The bullet had gone clean through, but it still burned every time he breathed deep. He didn't mind the pain. Pain meant he was still standing, still able to keep the promise he'd made on that dusty trail. "You're coming with me." Eliza came out of the doorway behind him, moving slower now, belly so round it seemed the baby might arrive before supper. She carried a tin cup of the same bitter coffee and rested her free hand on the small of her back. For a long minute they just looked across the valley, Samuel's Valley, where the grass was already pushing up green through the black scars of last month's fire. "They're comin' today," she said quietly. The hands Baxter ran off. "They want to know if there's work." Jack nodded. Word had spread fast. The Thorne place was hiring, paying fair, no questions about color or past. Already a dozen families. Black freedmen, Mexican vaqueros, even a couple of Cheyenne boys whose families had been pushed off the river, had camped down by the creek, waiting to see if the stories were true. "You sure you want me speakin' for you?" Jack asked. "This is your land, Eliza. Your name on the deed." She gave a soft laugh that still carried grief in it. "My name, your bullet holes. Seems we're partners now, whether the preachers said the words or not." He felt his face go warm, the way it always did when she looked straight at him like that. Steady, unafraid, proud. He cleared his throat. "Then we'll speak together." By noon the yard was full. Men in patched hats and worn boots, women with babies on hips, children chasing the ranch dogs that had come back the moment the Baxter brand was scratched off the gate. Jack and Eliza stood on the porch steps. No one had to ask them to talk. The crowd just quieted the way folks do when they sense something important is fixing to happen. Eliza spoke first. "My husband, Samuel Thorne, bought this land with money he earned fightin' for the Union. He paid the government price, got the paper, built the cabin with his own hands. Certain men didn't like seein' a black man own something they wanted, so they took it. They took him. But a judge in good standing has given it back, and I aim to keep it." Her voice shook only once, then steadied. "We need hands. Good hands. Honest hands. You work, you eat. You stay your family. Nobody here will ever be asked to bow or step off the porch again." A murmur ran through the crowd. Relief, disbelief, hope. An older man near the front took off his hat. "Ma'am, you mean that? Even for folks like me? I rode for the Confederacy. Lost everything after. Ain't many places'll have me." Eliza looked him dead in the eye. "If you're willin' to work beside a black widow and a man with a price on his head once upon a time, then you're welcome. War's over. Hate don't have to keep winning." Jack felt something crack open in his chest. Something he hadn't known was still locked. He stepped forward. "I ain't never owned land," he said, voice rough. "Never thought I'd live long enough. But I know cattle, I know grass, and I know what it feels like when powerful men lie about you and take what's yours. We'll brand our own cattle, Circle T, for Thorne. And every man and woman who rides for that brand rides free. You wrong somebody here, you answer to all of us. You stand by somebody here, we stand by you." A cheer went up, ragged and real. Hats sailed into the air. Someone started singing "Sweet Betsy" from Pike, and half the crowd joined in, off-key and beautiful. That night they butchered a steer, roasted it over mesquite, and the valley rang with guitar and laughter for the first time in years. Children danced while old men told war stories without anger. Jack watched Eliza move among them, touching shoulders, learning names, her hand never leaving the curve of her belly. When the moon rose full and silver, he found her sitting on a log by the creek. "Think we can do this?" she asked without looking up. "Really do this?" He knelt in the grass beside her, took her hand. "I think we already started." 3 weeks later the pains began just before dawn. Jack had slept in the barn loft so Eliza could have the bed, but he was in the house before the second cry left her throat. The women from the camp, Mrs. Alvarez the midwife and Ruth who'd birthed 7 of her own, boiled water and laid out clean sheets like it was Sunday. Jack paced the porch until his boots wore a groove, hat crushed in his hands. Hours passed. The sun climbed, burned, started down again. He heard her moan, then curse, then pray in a voice so fierce it scared the crows from the cottonwoods. At dusk Ruth stepped out, face shining with sweat, and said only 4 words, "Come meet your son." Jack's knees near buckled. He walked in like a man entering church for the first time. Eliza lay against the pillows, hair stuck to her cheeks, eyes bright with exhaustion and triumph. In the crook of her arm was a red, wrinkled miracle with a shock of dark hair and lungs already strong enough to wake the dead. She looked up at Jack and smiled the way sunrise smiles over mountains. "Samuel Jack Thorne," she whispered. "Say hello to your boy." Jack reached out one shaking finger. The baby grabbed it with surprising strength and held on. Something inside Jack, something that had been running since he was 16 years old, finally stopped. "I'm here," he told them both, voice cracking. "I ain't going nowhere." Seasons turned. The Circle T grew. They drove cattle to Abilene, brought back money to buy a windmill and a real iron cookstove. Children, black, brown, white, mixtures of all three, learned letters together in the new cabin school. When federal marshals finally came looking for the man on the old Texas poster, the whole town met them at the crossroads with rifles across their saddles and told them the only Jack Harlan they knew was a respectable rancher with a wife and 3 children, because 2 more came after little Sam. The marshals rode away without serving their paper. One spring evening, 10 years after the day Jack first saw a pregnant widow pulling a broken wagon, he and Eliza stood on the hill behind the house. Below them the ranch lights twinkled. Cookhouse, bunkhouse, the big log home they'd built the year the twins were born. Cattle grazed peaceful under a sky full of stars. Eliza slipped her arm through his. She was grayer now, stronger, laughter lines around her eyes like sunlight on water. "Remember when you told me, 'You're coming with me?'" she asked. "Hard to forget. Thought you might shoot me for the suggestion." She laughed softly. "I still might, if you ever try leavin'." He turned her to him, the way he had 1,000 times, and kissed her slow and certain. "Ain't nowhere else on this earth I belong," he said against her mouth. "You and me, Eliza, we pulled that wagon together. And look where it brought us." Down in the valley a guitar started playing. Their youngest daughter was learning Red River Valley, picking it out note by careful note. Soon voices joined in, men and women who had once been outcasts, singing about home. Eliza rested her head on Jack's good shoulder, the one that didn't ache when storms came. "Samuel always said the land would heal if we loved it fierce enough," she murmured. "Think he was right." Jack looked over the thriving ranch, the families, the future sleeping under that roof, and felt the last shadow of his old wanted poster blow away like dust on the wind. "Yeah," he said. He was right. And high above them, the wide western sky held them gentle and proud, the way it holds every soul brave enough to stand up, speak truth, and refuse to let injustice have the last word. Years rolled on like slow thunder across the high plains, and the Circle T became something folks talked about from the Red River to the Rockies. Not just a ranch, but a promise kept. Children who had once hidden behind their mother's skirts now rode tall in the saddle, speaking 3 languages before breakfast and arguing over who got to carry Miss Eliza's dinner plate to the porch when her knees started to ache. Jack's hair went iron gray and his limp got worse when the weather turned, but his eyes stayed sharp and his hands steady. Folks said he could still outshoot any man in 3 territories, though he hadn't drawn iron in anger since the day Baxter's trial ended. Little Sam, never little anymore, 6'3" and quiet like his daddy had been, ran the cattle side now. The twins, Rosa and Daniel, handled the horses. The youngest, Grace, could read law books before she could braid her own hair and spent her days riding circuit with the new territorial judge, making sure no widow ever had to pull a wagon alone again. But even the sweetest chapters have storms. It began with a letter, yellowed and creased, delivered by a stranger who rode in at dusk wearing a deputy U.S. Marshal's badge polished bright as pride. The man waited on the porch while Jack read the words twice, then a third time, the paper shaking in his sun-spotted hands. Eliza came out, drying her hands on her apron. One look at Jack's face and the smile she'd been wearing faded clean away. "What is it?" He handed her the letter without speaking. It was from the governor himself. Harlan Baxter, serving life in the territorial prison at Yuma, had died of fever 6 months earlier. On his deathbed he'd signed a confession claiming that Jack Harlan, now respected rancher of the Circle T, was not only the long-wanted Texas rustler Jack Quickdraw Harlan, but had also masterminded Baxter's own cattle thefts years before to frame him. The dying man swore he had proof locked in a bank box in Denver. Proof that would hang Jack if the governor chose to reopen the case. The deputy shifted his weight. "I'm sorry, ma'am, sir. Orders are to bring Mr. Harlan in for questioning. Governor wants it quiet, but he wants it done." Eliza's chin came up the same way it had the day she stood in front of 5 guns on a cabin porch. "You'll take him over my dead body." The deputy flushed red. "Ma'am, I got no wish to." Jack laid a gentle hand on her arm. "It's all right, Lizzie." Then, to the deputy, "I'll ride with you peaceable, but I want 1 week. My family gets 1 week to set things straight." The deputy looked at the Circle T brand on the gate, at the children watching wide-eyed from the corral, at the old men and women who had once been outcasts now standing shoulder to shoulder on the porch steps. He swallowed hard. 1 week, he agreed. "But I'll be staying at the hotel in town. You run, I'll have to bring a posse." Jack nodded. "I ain't run in 30 years. Ain't starting tonight." That night the house stayed lit till dawn. Jack told the full story for the first time in decades. Every ugly detail of the Texas frame-up. The night he rode away with nothing but the clothes on his back and a lie chasing him like wolves. He told them about the years of hiding his name, the shame of letting good folks believe he was only a drifting cowboy with no roots. When he finished, the room was quiet except for a long time. Then Grace, 19 and fierce as a hawk, stood up. "We ride to Denver," she said. "We find that box before the governor does. If there's lies in it, we burn them. If there's truth, we face it together." Sam shook his head. "Could be a trap. Baxter's kin might still be out there." Rosa, always the calm one, spoke soft. "Then we don't go alone." They left 3 days later, Jack, Eliza, Sam, Grace, and 20 riders wearing the Circle T brand. Old Running Wolf rode with them too, hair white as snow but back straight as ever. The deputy watched them leave town and didn't try to stop them. Something in his eyes said he hoped they'd come back clean. The ride to Denver took 8 hard days. They pushed through late snow in the passes and mud that sucked boots off horses. Eliza rode in the whole way, refusing the wagon, saying her bones were tougher than any lie Baxter could tell from the grave. In Denver they found the bank box easy enough. Baxter had paid for 20 years in advance. The clerk handed it over pale and trembling when 20 Circle T riders filled his lobby quiet as ghosts. Inside was a leather pouch. Inside the pouch, a stack of forged bills of sale, a forged confession with Jack's name scrawled at the bottom in a hand nothing like his own. And one more thing, a photograph. Jack, aged 22, wrists in irons, standing against a wall marked Galveston Jail 1866. On the back, in Baxter's spidery writing, "Proof the rustler lives." Grace stared at the picture, then at her father. "He kept this all these years waiting." Jack's voice came out gravel and smoke. "He wanted me to hang even after he was dead." Eliza took the photograph, turned it over, and with one motion tore it clean in half, then quarters, then eighths, letting the pieces flutter into the stove in the banker's office like black snow. "Dead men don't get to write the ending," she said. But it wasn't over. Word had spread. A new prosecutor, young and hungry for fame, announced he would reopen the case whether there was evidence or not. "Let a jury decide," he crowed to the newspapers. Trial date set for 30 days hence, back in Silver Creek. They rode home slower, heavier. Jack spoke little. At night he sat on the porch long after everyone slept, staring at the stars like they might spell out mercy. On the 5th night Eliza found him there. "You thinkin' of runnin'?" she asked straight out. He gave a tired smile. "Thought about it for half a minute. Then I looked at the barn Grace and Daniel built with their own hands. Looked at Sam's little girl learnin' to walk in the yard we bled for. And I knew I'd rather hang 1,000 times than leave y'all to carry my shadow." She sat beside him, took his rough hand in both of hers. "Then we fight. One more time." The day the trial started, Silver Creek overflowed. People came from 4 territories, some to see Jack Harlan swing, most to stand witness that the West had changed. The courtroom was the schoolhouse. Every bench was full, folks standing 3 deep along the walls. The prosecutor laid out his case smooth and oily. Baxter's confession? The missing photograph, he claimed it had been stolen. Old wanted posters waved like flags. Then Eliza stood to testify. She walked to the front slow and proud, belly no longer round but back straight as a fence post. She carried a thick bundle wrapped in oilskin. "May I approach the bench, Your Honor?" The judge, a man who had eaten Sunday dinner at the Circle T more than once, nodded. Eliza laid the bundle down and unwrapped it. Inside were more than 100 letters. Letters from freedmen whose land had been stolen by Baxter. Letters from native families driven off waterholes. Letters from white ranchers Baxter had bankrupted with crooked loans. Every one dated and signed. Then she laid down the torn pieces of the photograph, fitted together like a puzzle. "This is what a dead man's hate looks like," she said, voice ringing clear to the rafters. "But these letters, hundreds more waitin' outside, are what love and truth look like." She turned to the jury. 12 men and women who had worked, eaten, and prayed beside Jack Harlan for 20 years. "Y'all know my husband Samuel was murdered for the color of his skin. Y'all know Jack Harlan stood with me when no one else would. If you hang him for crimes a dead liar made up, then you hang every one of us who ever believed a man could change, that a place could heal, that justice is bigger than one man's grudge." She sat down. The prosecutor had no more questions. The jury went out at noon and came back in 11 minutes. "Not guilty." The cheer that went up shook dust from the rafters. Grown men cried. Women waved handkerchiefs like surrender flags turned to celebration. That night the Circle T threw the biggest party the valley had ever seen. Lanterns hung in every tree. Tables groaned under roast beef and beans and 3 wedding cakes someone had baked, just in case. Guitars and fiddles played till the stars faded. Jack and Eliza slipped away near midnight and walked up the same hill where they had stood the evening everything felt finished the first time. He carried a lantern. She carried a quilt. They spread it on the grass and lay back like young lovers, shoulders touching, looking up at the same sky that had watched them fight and bleed and choose each other again and again. "Think we're done with trouble now?" Jack asked, half teasing. Eliza laughed. The laugh he had fallen in love with on a dusty road a lifetime ago. "Lord, I hope not," she said. "Trouble keeps us kind." He turned his head, looked at the woman who had pulled a wagon when her heart was broken, who had stood in gunfire while great with child, who had torn a lie to pieces in front of the whole territory. "I love you, Mrs. Harlan." "I know," she whispered. "Took you long enough to say it proper." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the way a man kisses the only home he's ever truly had. Far below, music floated up the hill, Shenandoah, soft and sweet, carried on the same wind that once whipped dust into a desperate widow's eyes. And high above, the wide western sky spread out endless and kind, holding them both the way it holds every story that refuses to end in darkness. 2 people, 1 wagon, 1 promise spoken on a lonely road. "You're coming with me." They went together. Always.